I think we are very excited, obviously, because the relations between our two countries, the U.S. and Ghana, has been existing for a very long time. Back in 1957, when we gained our independence, when we had the Vice President then, Richard Nixon, visiting Ghana and meeting our kings and queens. Well, apart from that, the very famous, Bill Clinton visit of 1998, and then the George W. Bush visit also in 2008, and then the very famous first black African-American president, Barack Obama, also visiting us in 2009. So we see this visit as a very important one that we are very confident and sure that at the end of the day is going to strengthen the economic and bilateral relations that exist between our two countries.
The U.S. says what will be on top of the agenda for the U.S. Vice President will be strengthening our ties on economic growth, food security. Also, there's the effect of the Russian-Ukraine war. From our side, what will be our focal points? We know that the President, for instance, is running beyond the return, which is also a good foreign policy relations for headlines and those in the diaspora. What are we likely to take advantage of?
I think it is going to be very important, especially in a bilateral relations and a bilateral meeting that is going to happen between President Akufo-Addo, the Ghanaian side, and also Vice President Kamala Harris on the U.S. side tomorrow. We are very confident that at that particular meeting, when it ends, something very positive is going to come out of it. But if you look at the background so far over the past few months in terms of relations between Africa and the U.S., if you clearly remember, the Secretary of State, Blinken, for himself, visited Ethiopia and Niger. In those two visits, the main focus was on security. If you look at this visit of Vice President Kamala Harris, the focus is basically on economic grounds. And so from Ghana, she's going to go to Tanzania, and then from Tanzania to Zambia at the same time. So if you look at the economic background of these two countries, that should tell you that the focus of this visit is on economic grounds. Somewhere last year, if you clearly remember, where our president also visited Washington, it was the U.S.-Africa relations. It was a big summit that seemed to sort of strengthen the economic ties between the continent of Africa and the United States. And so for us here in Ghana, we see this particular visit as a very key one, a good follow-up, visit, after that particular U.S.-Africa summit in Washington, D.C., where our president, Akufo-Addo, hinted that it was so important for America, the U.S., to be very serious when it comes to the relations between, the continent of Africa and the United States. Because clearly, remember, if you follow the trend closely, China is very interested, pushing very hard. Russia is very interested, also pushing hard. But we should always remember that Africa and all the countries in Africa are sovereign states. The most important thing is that whatever economic, decisions are taking are going to be decisions that are going to benefit our two continents and our two countries.
And thousands of people are watching us from across, not just Ghana, even the sub-region as well. And for those in Ghana, their concern will be about the kind of security we're seeing. We've been subjected to it already here as the pressmen, but what are going to be the security arrangements through town? What should Ghanaians expect? Will there be a slight change from the arrangement?
No, I think there is always a standard protocol when it comes to security on every presidential visit or vice presidential visit. This is not different from any of the ones that we've been having. When we had the Ivorian president visits, the same. When we had the king, all the kings that we've had, all the presidents, all the prime ministers that we've had, it's basically the same. Obviously, I'm sure you traveled a lot. I mean, everywhere you go in the world, when you see a presidential convoy, it is only advisable that you park so that they are able to pass. But apart from that, I think there is nothing so exceptional. What is going to happen on Tuesday is so of importance to us as a nation because, Vice President Kamala Harris would also be addressing a lecture where it's going to be at the Black Star Square, the Independence Arch, where she will be addressing Africa and the world on the importance of keeping this close relations that exist between our two, continents. And most importantly, and that's of real interest to me, because on Wednesday also she will be meeting a number of women entrepreneurs, emphasizing on the fact that it is so important for us to take private sector very seriously. We always say that that is the engine of growth. And so this particular meeting between Vice President Kamala Harris and the many, entrepreneurs that she's going to meet on Wednesday would be sort of sealing that particular notion that our country, our continent should put a lot into entrepreneurship, because at the end of the day, that is the future of our continent.
We know you have a long day, quite a lot to do, but from here, what's likely to happen? Are we expecting the Vice President to join us here?
Yes, so Vice President Kamala Harris will be welcomed by our Vice President, Alhaji Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. You know, the moment, he's done receiving her, she will walk up to the podium up there that has been set, where she will be addressing, Africa and the rest of the world. In that particular speech, we're expected to hear why she's here and why perhaps she also made a very key choice to visit the two other African countries, that is Tanzania and Zambia, at the same time.
And we're also looking forward to that key statement that President Akufo-Addo will be making tomorrow, I believe, when the U.S. Vice President comes to the Jubilee House. We are not allowed to know what the President may say, but can you just give us a sense of what to expect? The last time the President met with high-ranking U.S. officials at the U.S. Africa Summit, it was much more about our border security, the fact that there's a growing influence of Russia towards our northern borders. Will the President follow the same line, and will he touch on other matters?
Well, as immediate past, chairman of the Economic Community of West African States or ECOWAS, the President is privy to a lot of security situation in our sub-region and especially our continent. Basically touch on that, but what is most important is that a lot of the decision and what the President will be talking about will come out as a result of the bilateral discussion that the two leaders are going to have. But obviously we know where we are now as a nation, as a continent, and as a world. We know a lot of nations are struggling economically, and so the President will use this very key opportunity also to talk about the need that our two countries find ways and means of tackling the many economic challenges that the world is facing. But we are very confident that this particular visit is going to be a win-win situation for both countries.
And Jefferson, finally, how would you react to the claims that Ghana appears to be drawing too close to the U.S., which may, of course, come at our detriment? The fact that the East, China, and other key partners that we used to hold in high esteem may also get offended about how we are treating or giving much more priority to the other side. Is that of concern to the Jubilee House as well?
Ghana is a sovereign state. Ghana has been a close friend with a lot of African, European, Asian, Australians, people all over the world. Our relations with countries is not based on, political reasons. We are at peace with every nation that is at peace with us. Over the past, if you clearly follow our economic situation, you remember that our foreign finance minister recently returned from China. These are very close relations that we've kept for a very long time, and so we don't see this visit as one that is making a clear statement and all that. But of course, our relations with the United States has been a very strong one for a very long time. Our relations with China and all other countries have been very strong for a long time. If you listen to the speeches of our president, he's always focused on the world living side by side, living together in peace and in harmony. And so that is how we see this visit. It's purely on friendship basis. Ghana is at peace with all nations, and it is important that every country that wants to visit Ghana is welcome. President Akufo-Addo has visited the United States quite a number of times since he became president. He has visited China, before. He's been to Japan and a lot of these countries. And I can clearly tell you, in fact, when he was a foreign minister, then I was also, the media relations officer at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I clearly remember one of the trips that we made, for example, to Russia. It was at that time one of the key visits, if I clearly remember, it was his very last foreign visit to that particular country, and also as a foreign minister. So if you follow this trend, you know that Ghana is basically at peace and real economic friendship.
And Jeff, I thought that would have been the last, but since you're talking about China, IMF is on the table. The U.S. Vice President represents a country that has some quota at the board level. Are we likely to make that plea, try and negotiate diplomatically just to get that board approval from the IMF?
I think that particular question is beyond me. I think it is something that if the president wants to address, that's going to happen at the press briefing tomorrow. That is going to happen immediately after the bilateral meetings between our two countries. As long as the media are going to be there, I'm sure that you keep this particular question so that if you meet the president, you ask him.
Yeah. And your message to Ghanaians?
Well, I expect all of us to see this visit as a very important visit. visit. It tells us that yes, our president's foreign policy has been a very strong one, especially if you see the number of leaders that have visited our country over the past 6 years. All high-profile visits have happened here, and so that is how I want Ghanaians to look at it. But I'm very confident and very sure that looking at the international presence, the international media coverage that we are seeing today, that this particular visit will go a very long way to help the relations between our two countries.
Thanks, Jeff, and we wish you well as well. We know you are in for that big task. We'll talk about it later on, but thank you for joining us.